Is Morbius actually in the MCU? Look out, Bruce Wayne, because Marvel's very own Batman is coming to the big screen in 2022. That's right, folks, everybody's favorite living vampire, Michael Morbius, is finally getting his own film on January 28th, 2022. On Tuesday, Sony released a trailer for this long-gestating Marvel movie, and it confirms suspicions and theories that many fans have had about how exactly the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the Cinematic Universe formerly known as the SPUMC will coexist moving forward. And we're going to break everything down in just a moment, including the Easter eggs we spotted along the way, but in order to do so, we need to spoil elements of Venom, Let There Be Carnage, and Loki, as well as discuss potential spoilers for both Spider-Man No Way Home and Morbius. So if you're worried about anything like that, echolocate the nearest exit before you discover something shocking.
If you're gonna run, do it now.
So after watching the Morbius trailer, you might have some questions. I mean, I know I certainly did. Like, why'd they go with this wacky cover of People Are Strange by the Doors? Which cinematic universe did this take place in anyway? Why doesn't Michael Morbius, a doctor, not know the word sonar? Some kind of bat radar? I don't know. Who cares? Anyway, what's perhaps most illuminating about this trailer is how it recontextualizes and expands on both what happens in Venom Let There Be Carnage's post-credit scene and what we know is going to happen in Spider-Man No Way Home. Specifically, this trailer reveals two major possibilities. Morbius takes place in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, as will seemingly all Sony Spider-Man universe films moving forward, or the Sony Spider-Man universe is a branch timeline from the sacred timeline that is the MCU, and elements of both worlds are bleeding together, probably because of whatever happens in Spider-Man No Way Home. But given what we see in this trailer, I'm more inclined to believe the former rather than the latter. Now, before we go any further, let's contextualize everything with a timeline of events. So it all begins with the Loki finale, when Sylvie stabbed He Who Remains and began our Kang Watch in earnest. By killing He Who Remains, she opened the floodgates for countless branch timelines and parallel realities to thrive, effectively kickstarting the Marvel Multiverse. Then in the Spider-Man No Way Home trailer, Doctor Strange is distracted by Peter Parker while casting a spell designed to make everyone forget that he's actually Spider-Man. Instead, it has the effect of tearing a hole in the fabric of the multiverse and spilling a ton of Spider-Man villains from yesteryear into the main MCU timeline. As we saw during the post-credit scene of Venom Let There Be Carnage, Eddie Brock and Venom's tropical telenovela viewing is interrupted suddenly when they are consumed by a flash of light that bears a striking visual resemblance to what we see happening as Doctor Strange casts his spell in Spider-Man No Way Home. And when the light fades, Eddie and Venom are now in the MCU timeline as confirmed by the TV, which features J. Jonah Jameson prattling on about Peter Parker being Spider-Man and how he's a menace. And that brings us to Morbius, which seems like it's happening in the wake of Venom and potentially in the aftermath of Spider-Man No Way Home as well, based on everything we see in this trailer. And yes, the trailer does cover your standard Morbius fare about how a man with a degenerative blood condition used an experimental treatment involving vampire bats to try and cure himself, but oops, accidentally turned himself into a living vampire. But if you want to know more about that, go watch our Explainiac video all about his comic book lore. Much more interestingly, the trailer liberally sprinkles in references and allusions to other Marvel characters, Spider-Man villains, and even features a major cameo. Now, the first one we see is new to the Sony Spider-Man universe and the MCU, and that is Horizon Labs. First introduced in 2010's Amazing Spider-Man 648, it gave Peter Parker a lab of his very own where he could develop new costumes like the stealth suit we saw Night Monkey wear in Far From Home. And with Tony Stark out of the picture, this could prove to be a valuable resource for Peter Parker moving forward, that is assuming Tom Holland signs another contract with the House of Mouse and Sony. Now, another high-tech lab of note has a much more direct connection to someone we're going to be seeing very soon in Spider-Man No Way Home. We see the Oscorp building towering above the New York skyline, which you may know is Norman Osborn's company. And although he's something of a scientist himself, he's also something of a Green Goblin himself too. Rumors of the villain's death, though, were greatly exaggerated because, as evidenced by that pumpkin bomb and that signature cackle in the No Way Home trailer, one of Spider-Man's toughest defoes is back, baby. Now, in Spider-Man Far From Home, we saw that Avengers Tower is undergoing some significant remodeling in anticipation of a new owner. And while the advertisement was seemingly teasing the Fantastic Four turning that skyscraper into the MCU's version of the Baxter Building from the comics, it could also be the new site of Oscorp or even Horizon Labs in the MCU as well. More clues appear in a shot of Morbius reading a copy of the Daily Bugle, the newspaper of record in the Spider-Man universe that we saw Eddie Brock writing for in Venom Let There Be Carnage. In the MCU though, J. Jonah Jameson takes more of an InfoWars style approach to news media, but that isn't to say they couldn't have more of a legacy style traditional outlet as well. In addition to accusing Morbius of vampire murder, the paper also teases two other Spider-Man characters, Rhino in a tongue-in-cheek headline about a zoo hoax, and Black Cat, who's been on Sony's development slate for years at this point. The real question is, will we ever actually get a Black Cat and Silver Sable movie? Only time will tell. Venom is alluded to twice more in this trailer, firmly establishing those characters, Morbius and Venom, do in fact exist in the same universe. The first time is by a cop investigating a crime scene who references that thing in San Francisco, i.e. Venom and or probably Carnage, and again by Morbius himself when he spooks a guy at the end of the trailer. Far more revealing, though, is the presence of Michael Keaton here as Adrian Toomes, aka the Vulture, who we first saw in the MCU in Spider-Man Homecoming. And although his presence in this movie was teased by the film's very first trailer, it takes on a greater significance in light of all the multiversal mayhem taking place in the main MCU timeline. Because in the first Morbius trailer, Toomes asks Morbius if he got tired of doing that whole good guy thing, and here he says they should stay in touch. As we saw during Spider-Man Homecoming's mid-credit scene with Michael Mando as Scorpion, a version of the Sinister Six was already fomenting in the Tom Holland Spideyverse long before No Way Home teased a multiversal version. But adding further fuel to that speculative fire is a shot of Morbius walking past graffiti of Spider-Man with the word murderer written across it. Obviously, this is in response to Spider-Man being framed for the murder of Quentin Beck at the end of Spider-Man Far From Home, which in turn leads directly into the events of No Way Home. But what's doubly intriguing is that the artwork features Spider-Man's costume from the Sam Raimi films. So what exactly is going on here? Does Morbius take place before No Way Home, after No Way Home, directly in the middle like some sort of Morbius sandwich? For now, the question is actually kind of irrelevant because for all intents and purposes, it seems like they're living in one big cinematic universe. And while this is a Sony production made in cooperation with Marvel, they could be playing on opposite sides of one really big sandbox. This way, when it makes sense to do so, each company can bring in elements of the other. The MCU can play with the Sony characters, Sony can play with the MCU characters, vice versa, without sacrificing the lion's share of box office receipts. With Marvel's constant focus on a cohesive, unified cinematic universe over the past decade plus of films and series, and the global popularity of Spider-Man and his Rogues Gallery, it's the only option that makes sense to me both fiscally and narratively. New York City is a gigantic place. You could easily make any number of arguments about why Morbius never runs into Spider-Man despite seeing the character referenced literally everywhere. Everywhere I look, I see his face. Thwip. Likewise, you could have other Avengers offhandedly mentioning something about the vampire murders in New York City as a way to subtly tease Blade. But given everything we've seen thus far in Loki, Venom 2, and the Spider-Man No Way Home trailers, it seems as though Morbius is proof positive that these two cinematic universes are now one and the same, even if they don't want to outright admit it. And if that means we get to see Blade teased at the end of Morbius, then all of that ice skating uphill might be worth it after all.
Some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill.
Anyway, folks, there you have it. We'll keep our eyes peeled for even more multiversal clues as the inexorable march towards Morbius continues, and we'll keep you posted here and on Nerdist.com. In the meantime, though, tell us, what did you think of the Morbius trailer? Did you spot anything that we missed? And which universe do you think Morbius is actually taking place in, and why?
Because I thought that was just theoretical. I mean, that completely changes how we understand the initial singularity. It's insane.
Let us know in the comments below, and for the latest and greatest in the world of pop culture, stay tuned to Nerdist.com.